2.
Hello, I'm Nicole Crites in our AZ Family Newsroom, live tonight with Dr. Sisley from Scottsdale Research Institute, and we are talking about the push to legalize psychedelic mushrooms, how that is fueling a boom in the black market sales and mushroom labs here in Arizona. A lot of things to talk about with this, targeting teens and kids on social media, but also the push to investigate therapeutic options for folks in need, like veterans with PTSD. So many points of conversation, and we want to take your questions and do our best to answer them in this live conversation right now on YouTube and Facebook. So whatever platform you're on right now, go ahead and type in any questions that you might have, and we're going to do our best to get to them. We have some already coming into the chat at this point, but we're going to first start off with the story in case you missed watching it live on television. We're going to go ahead and play that now. Type your questions as they come your way, and we will answer them on the backside. Take a listen. Wait list of patients eager to be part of the first clinical trial. Scroll Snapchat. It's easy to find flashy reels for psychedelic mushrooms, dealers posting price charts and QR codes for illegal psilocybin shrooms and edibles delivered to your door.
Open the door! Open the door!
Narcotics detectives are busting more labs in residential neighborhoods all over the valley and state. Rooms full of mason jars and plastic tubs, bags of mushrooms, psilocybin powder, capsules, edibles, and infused chocolate bars in every flavor imaginable.
We caught a drug dealer bringing drugs to our son's bedroom window.
This Valley father doesn't want to be named. His home security camera helped catch the dealer who sold to his 15-year-old son. Detectives say it was another teen who helped lock up 3 suspects higher up the chain.
There was a very large drug bust and weapons seizure related to the information that I provided them.
He says his son started with weed and switched to mushrooms so it wouldn't show on his home drug test. This picture was on his cell phone showing what he bought and ate hours before he wound up in the ER.
That put him into a psychotic episode, and it unfortunately unfolded at a very public event. It was at a high school football game. Blue and red lights are flashing everywhere. There's quite a crowd. Yeah, it was very disturbing.
How long did it take for him to start coming back to reality?
It took a very long time. He actually had to have multiple doses of antipsychotics.
We hear about that all the time. We see it all the time.
Maricopa County Detective Matt Shea works a regional drug task force tracking a recent explosion of illegal psilocybin on our streets.
Not just 1 pound, 10 pounds, 15 pounds, 20 pounds at a time of mushrooms. It's crazy.
He says just as legalizing marijuana multiplied black market pot sales in Arizona tenfold, they're seeing a precursor push of psilocybin mushrooms flooding the valley, specifically targeting kids and teens.
It rewires the brain a bit, and that's not something we should be doing to our kids that are 16, 17, 18 years old, 14 years old, 12 years old. We're seeing it.
There have been countless cases of tragedies, close calls, and bad trips from psychedelic hallucinations. 8 months ago, an Alaska Airlines pilot tried killing the engines mid-flight, convinced it would wake him up. A big problem with self-dosing suggestions like this. Start with 1 or 2 pieces. If there are no effects, have another.
So I could have it and nothing's happened for 20 minutes. I'll eat more because I'm like, oh, that must have been not enough. I'll eat more, and I'll eat more, and I'll eat more. Next thing you know, everything hits at once. Bam, now you freak out at a football game.
It's kind of like a Russian roulette here.
Dr. Sisley runs the only lab in the country cleared by the feds to grow psilocybin mushrooms, not synthetics.
These mushrooms are not to be played with, and they can take you into some very dark rabbit holes.
She's got a wait list of patients eager to be part of the first clinical trial in the world right here in Scottsdale.
They can be a wonderful medicine, or they can cause very severe side effects.
Her trial findings for safe dosing standards could take another year. One reason the governor vetoed the push to legalize psilocybin clinics without any proof of diagnosis for treatment.
We need to start with the science first.
While her lab takes precautions to prevent toxic mold, illegal home grows are covered in it. Are there any regulations in place to protect the next family that comes into that apartment or house?
No, unfortunately it's not.
A hidden harm on top of another threat. guns seized in nearly every bust.
They're meeting people they don't know to sell a product that's illegal.
Kids hear that it's legal somewhere else, so they think it's okay.
The #1 focus for this man's family now, getting his son sober. He says residential rehabs already run more than $150,000 out of pocket, but the greater cost is not knowing if a flashback of that bad trip will derail him down the road.
The damage it's doing is unmeasurable.
Welcome back. You are joining us live in the newsroom. Nicole Crites here with Dr. Sisley from Scottsdale Research Lab. For folks who are watching on Facebook Live, apparently there was a little bit of a glitch off the top, so we're going to replay that for you at the end of this feed. But we're encouraging you, whatever platform you're watching on right now, to go ahead and type in any questions in the prompts that you have for us, and Dr. Sue and I will do the best to answer those for you live, because we know there are a lot of questions, a lot of concerns that people have. We know that psychedelic mushrooms are now legal in the states of Colorado and in Oregon, and so a lot of folks have been talking about Arizona just the other day. Our state lawmakers passed with bipartisan support 1570, which the governor just vetoed. This would have approved psilocybin clinics for therapeutic treatment in Arizona, and the governor said, let's wait on that, because she wants to support efforts like what's happening with SRI and Dr. Sue here to get clinical trials underway. She says we need to let the science follow first. So, Dr. Sue, let's start with that and talk about, you just got back from Amsterdam. Yeah. Arizona to Amsterdam, you guys are putting us on the map. Your clinic is the only federally authorized lab in the country, and your team will be doing the very first clinical trial with psilocybin mushrooms, the stalks themselves, in the world, putting us on the map globally. Talk about that.
It's true, yeah. It's pretty amazing because we hear so much excitement and hype around psilocybin, and people assume that all this data is from natural mushrooms. But in fact, there's never been a single clinical trial anywhere on the planet looking at whole natural mushrooms, like real-world psilocybin or real-world magic mushrooms have never been tested in humans in a controlled setting. And so that is really challenging because there's so much enthusiasm about moving treatment forward immediately. But in fact, without that data, it's very difficult to know how to create a regulated market, how to dose the material, how to rule out contaminants and other dangerous side effects. So that's why we're excited. We managed to pass a bill in the budget a year before that authorized $5 million. It would go through a competitive RFP process, so it's a granting process through the health department. And the health department looked at all the applications and ended up choosing our lab, Scottsdale Research Institute, as well as U of A College of Medicine. So both of us are splitting a portion of that money, and we will be able now to proceed with the first ever human studies with real-world natural mushrooms, which we're super pumped about because this is so crucial that we finally get this data. You know, it's important. I think elected officials know that science should be helping guide these decisions, but we really put the cart before the horse here in trying to push a treatment program before we had even a single study looking at these natural mushrooms. And let's face it, when you extract a single molecule out of this complex mushroom, you know, these mushrooms are loaded with different alkaloids and tryptamines. You can see them on our HPLC, our analytical lab equipment. You'll see all these different peaks representing different compounds. So the natural mushroom is loaded with all these unique molecules that could be working together synergistically to create an even more robust effect, but also could be creating more side effects. And we need to learn about how these mushrooms work, how they don't work, how to mitigate those dangerous side effects.
And you've talked to me before about how it could take another year to get this clinical trial underway and get that peer-reviewed and published, and then try to fine-tune those what we call safe dosing standards. We've done stories before on the push to get psilocybin mushroom out when we talk about like veterans with PTSD, people with other chronic pain issues, depression, anxiety, suicidality, things like that, where pharmaceuticals have not been working, or they're taking, I've interviewed a veteran before who had a cabinet full of pharmaceuticals, and he's like, I was taking dozens of meds every day, and that's no way to live, because then you have all these side effects and everything like that. So a lot of veterans I've spoken to in the past, and in the story that's on our website right now, we link to one that I did last year with a Marine veteran from Sierra Vista who went to Costa Rica to do the magic mushroom therapy, and she said that it saved her life. So we did get some early responses online. I'm just going to shuttle off a few of those. A lot of people who are supporting expanding psilocybin and psychedelic mushrooms for therapeutic use, saying we need to legalize these. Finally, mushrooms are here. This is not a gateway drug. We can't be blaming the drugs for people misusing them. And I do want to say that we have done in the past kind of profiles with veterans. And I will say at that time, everybody was really focusing on anyone who's advocated for this responsibly, saying that set and setting are so crucial. And unfortunately, what we're seeing in street use is, one, you don't know what you're getting, what you're taking, and two, you can't regulate the dosing or the setting, and that's why we're having bad trips.
It's true. I mean, yeah, when you procure things from the underground market, you have no idea what's in it. It may be mushrooms, it may be DMT or other psychedelic compounds that can cause a hallucinogenic experience, but drug dealers don't care about quality control. That's one thing we know for sure, and they are going to load up whatever they can that's cheapest for them, that they can sell for the highest amount. So yeah, when people are obtaining what they think are shroom chocolates, it may have a variety of different contaminants and chemicals that could be dangerous. And so that's the tough thing. We think generally psilocybin mushrooms seem to be pretty well tolerated. Most people seem to report positive experiences, but there's also a slew of people, you know, on the flip side who've had scary experiences, what we call psychedelic horror, and sometimes those can persist. People can become psychotic and end up on psychiatric meds for months or years afterwards, trying to integrate that experience.
I know in our conversations we've had on the phone, she's been a wealth of information for me, kind of background study for this story. She was talking about this persistent psychosis, and people who don't use it responsibly can't get out of that if they have a bad trip, can't like get themselves out of that. I'm just going to read some of these comments that we're getting on Facebook right now. Marcy saying thank you for helping veterans and the work that you do. It really matters, Dr. Sue. Another person asking here, Scott, is FDA open to the idea of studying natural mushrooms? So we've talked before about, in the story that I did last year, how the VA is now studying like MDMA. So when we talk about psychedelics, that's the umbrella of like mushrooms, MDMA, ketamine, all these different variants of psychedelics. And the VA has been funding and getting private donors to fund those studies. Those studies have actually proved very successful. I think we have Jason, who is helping behind the scenes, has a graphic slate that we put up for, can we get a look at the MDMA treatment results here? This was from the study that we did. This is coming from the federal study. This is 88% effective in reducing symptoms, 67% effective in curing PTSD. And let's take a look at the next slate here, the psychedelic therapy. Because when we talk about what the drug actually does, yeah, here, muting fear and pain, Dr. Sue, heightening awareness, and helping people process trauma. So from your standpoint, that's one thing. It's not just figuring out the dosing standard, it's also helping people work through that system. So it's not just giving them a pill or an edible chocolate, but it's also walking them through that process,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's crucial that patients, when they take this type of medicine, their brain changes and they develop all kinds of new neural connections that can leave people vulnerable. So often, you know, it's important to we talk about the integration work that occurs after the medicine has been administered, and that's what we're. Oh, is that
I'm just
bugging
adjusting
you?
your
Oh, okay, thank you. But yeah, it's really essential to have that integration piece, and I think that's what the MDMA was showing, that people who did, people in general who do MDMA alone without therapy often aren't getting the kind of super positive transformative experiences that were described in the study. I mean, to be able to get almost 70% of the people with no detectable PTSD at the end of just 3 MDMA sessions is truly extraordinary. I mean, I consider that a huge medical breakthrough, but it also kind of reinforces this idea that you do need that therapy piece in order to make sure that the revelations that come up in an MDMA trial, in an MDMA session, need to be integrated into people's daily lives.
Process.
Yeah, in order to understand.
So you've lifted all this, you've done the heavy lifting and taken off those layers of all the trauma that has been kind of suppressed for so years, decades for some people. But then what do you do with that? So it's being responsible about that therapy of it. As that viewer was asking, do you foresee in the future, like you're the very first to take on this clinical trial here, but do you ever see the feds working any kind of clinical trials?
I don't believe that FDA will ever allow whole natural mushrooms to get all the way through the drug development process. So that's why we're focused on trying to do the phase 1 study and then work with the government to provide medicine maybe under federal right to try law. So that's our hope, but it's a long process. I mean, even just getting the IND approved for this initial study is super challenging because the FDA doesn't view anything as a medicine unless it's a single molecule targeting a single receptor in the body. And this is deliberately complex. These mushrooms have.
What do you mean? Federal complexity?
Right, exactly.
One thing I learned too is that they're trying to classify these as breakthrough therapy studies. That will fast track the clinical trials, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the FDA will authorize them or fund them either. So I'm getting some questions that are coming in. This one is Mo and some of the others on our other platforms asking about how and why is nature criminalized? Why is this a class 1 scheduled drug here, and how does this have to do with the war on drugs? Has that gotten in the way with studying science? What do you think is the biggest barrier to research to try to find, because we've talked about, like, we've looked at one statistic that we have when it comes to veterans and suicide. There's been very little to move the needle to get them the help that they need, and this is something you've worked on personally. How do you think that has impacted research in these new different types of therapeutic modalities?
Well, I think if you're a single molecule like MDMA or LSD or ketamine, you're going to have no problem getting approvals because that meets the FDA's definition of what is medicine. But if you're a natural material like a whole plant or a whole mushroom or a whole root, you're going to constantly receive pushback from FDA because they feel really uncomfortable with natural material. So that's why our charity is focused on studying whole plant and whole mushroom, because pharmaceutical companies will never embrace this kind of work because they can't patent whole mushroom or whole cannabis plant or whole iboga root. They have to break it down into an individual molecule and patent that. And we're fortunate because we are a charity and we're committed to actually making medicine available at some point once the science, justifies that. And so we're on a different path than a pharmaceutical company that's strictly seeking profits and trying to, find the fastest way to get through the FDA.
Ethan is commenting here that we have to acknowledge indigenous people who've been the stewards of these plant medicines long before America was founded and protect the environment where these plants naturally grow. And that is so true because we talk about this emerging therapy, but really it has been around for generations. And so this is something that is new because you're looking at it from like a criminalized, illegal, illicit drug to now something that we might be able to harness into life-changing, life-saving medicine for people. I'm also getting a comment here from Dustin who says, have you tested on people with neurological issues who are not veterans, like individuals who suffer from stammers, stuttering, ADHD, or ADD? There are a lot of different chronic conditions you were talking about.
Yeah, we're looking at a variety of illness. In our study, we're going to be enrolling patients with life-threatening illness, which we're defining very broadly. So it'll be obviously, but classic terminally ill patients, as well as people who might have, military veterans with undertreated PTSD that are at risk for suicide. It'll be pain patients, addiction patients that are at risk for fatal overdose. So we're trying to catch a broad swath of the population. But we do think that there is potential that psilocybin could be effective for some of these neurologic conditions that he was asking about, but the studies haven't been done yet. But we hope, the way the psilocybin penetrates the brain and is able to, activate all these new connections in the brain suggests that there may be a role for using this in neurologic diseases, in spinal cord injuries, all kinds of things.
New neuro pathways.
Yeah.
I learned so much with all of this. Someone else asked me here, thanks for leading the charge to ensure that this is credible research performed with actual plant material. I'm sure it's a very real struggle. How can we support your work? It is important to note that I think I mentioned how the governor, in her veto letter of that bipartisan legislation for the psilocybin therapeutic clinics, said we're going to give $5 million to this research. So she has acknowledged that it's important, but there was a threat that that money was even going to get clawed back. We talked about the state budget deficit, and that's still apparently in limbo. Even though in her veto letter it sounded like she was putting her endorsement on protecting that money for your research.
I think that, we're always going to be uncertain as long as our state general fund is running in a deficit mode. Right now it looks like the legislature has solved that problem, but you never know if there's an appeal around the opioid settlement funds or something else happens. Suddenly any unspent funds could be clawed back into the general fund and we would lose the ability to complete the research. So what we're hoping is that that won't happen and we'll be allowed to utilize the $2 million that has been authorized to us, and that U of A College of Medicine will utilize their $1 million to do their study on OCD. They're actually looking at natural mushrooms for treating obsessive compulsive disorder, and our lab will be supplying them the federally legal mushrooms that we grow at our site. So, but if we don't, if we're not able to secure all the funding for the study, then what we're hoping is that people will recognize that we are a qualified charitable tax credit organization. So we have had that designation for many years, and we are able to take donations, $400 per person or $800 for a couple, and it's an actual dollar-for-dollar tax credit. So that's different than a tax deduction. This is much more valuable, and it actually lowers your taxes by that exact amount that you donate. So I'd encourage people to go to our website, scottsdaleresearchinstitute.com, and take a look at how they can support the studies.
Well, I'm sure that we have a lot of interest from folks saying, sign me up. I'd love to be a part of your clinical trial, but you already have a wait list. How do you even go about vetting to make sure that you're getting the best, people for that trial? And how will you'll let people know when there's an opportunity to be a part of the next tier of your study, right?
We're really excited to start screening patients, and as soon as the FDA gives us the green light, whenever you do human trials on Schedule I drugs in the U.S., you have to go through 3 agencies. First, you start with FDA, which is the hardest. Then you go to the Institutional Review Board, IRB committees, which are basically ethics committees, and we'll be using the ASU IRB, the University IRB, and we expect that to be very straightforward once FDA approval is achieved. And then we go to the DEA and we get our Schedule I licensing to get the study started. So once all those things are in place, we will then put a notice out to the public inviting them to reach out to us, and we'll go through a formal screening process with all these people. But you're right, we do have a massive wait list already of people who've expressed interest, and it just shows you the amount of of suffering that we have in our own state. There's so many people who are seeking healing for a myriad of different conditions, and the hype around psilocybin has been, problematic because people are now viewing magic mushrooms as a cure for everything, and we have to try to temper that excitement by doing the actual controlled trials that will help us understand what these mushrooms can truly help with and maybe what they can't help with, so people can figure out other pathways for healing. But yeah, we were excited. One of the things that was so impressive when we ran that bill for the $5 million in research money, we had all sorts of folks coming out of the woodwork. We had wonderful, compelling stories from not just the military veterans, but the firefighters who are dealing with trauma on a daily basis. We've had retired police officers and even disabled officers coming forward, and even hospice patients who are dealing with existential anxiety, the fear of dying, that are seeking this material. And so we're hoping that this diverse coalition that has helped us get to this point will continue to help people understand because most of them have already tried mushrooms through either, leaving the country and getting treatment there or seeking it underground. But we're hoping these studies will shed enough light. They'll be, the good thing about us versus Big Pharma is because we're a charity, we publish all of our data, the good and the bad will all be put into the public domain so everyone can scrutinize it. And that's really important to us. Like, even if the data doesn't look positive, it's all going to get published, and that's what is really important.
And you mentioned hearing about other success stories. So we mentioned Oregon and Colorado, where this is already legal, but we're getting some others who have chimed in here on social media. Heather, Air Force veteran. My life 4 years ago. Heather, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your service. John is asking how long it will take for the science to justify the use of this medicine, and then Heather also asking, aren't we talking about two different things? We're talking about clinical research for therapeutic purposes, yes, versus recreational use where someone misused it without education and oversight. So yes, to both of those things, and I think that is an important differentiation. Also, I want to bring up the point you mentioned chocolate mushrooms, and people, those have been in the news lately because the Poison Control, FDA, DEA has put out alerts saying there was, I think the label was diamond shrooms that were sold online and also in smoke shops, and their website claimed that they did not contain any actual psilocybin. We were seeing cases in Prescott and Prescott Valley where adults, not just kids, but adults were passing out at intersections, ending up in the hospital, intubated for days, having seizures, just being out of whack, and similar stories of people getting very sick. Well, we did interview one Valley mom whose son went to the ER, and she said that the doctor told her he tested positive for psilocybin, because up till now I thought that is completely different from what we're talking about. But again, whether it's a supplement, and those are unregulated by the FDA, this is also like an asterisk thing. So if you get a bottle that says this is from the earth, it's a supplement, blah, 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 those are not regulated by the FDA, so we still don't know what's in those things. But yeah, it is a balance of recreational versus therapeutic clinical dosing. And that's, I think, the very fine line we have to walk here, because you saw the same thing firsthand with marijuana. You were a pioneer in that research, having seen firsthand. You talked about the veterans who you've helped in the past and wanting to make a difference for them. But we've seen that fine line between legal versus recreational use, and how it can go sideways.
Yeah, it's always a challenge to walk that tightrope, because we want to create, we want to understand what the science shows, and then help us decide if a treatment network is warranted, and then how to put that in place in a way that will guarantee sick people can have legal access to medicine, but then also prevent young people or other folks who are just seeking recreational experience that they that doesn't derail a legitimate program. And it is tricky. We're seeing in Oregon where now they've treated over 4,000 patients with natural psilocybin mushrooms, and sadly, we don't have any data. They didn't collect one shred of data on how people did, either good or bad. So that was such a huge missed opportunity. We're working with them to hopefully help them set up a patient registry so we can understand those experiences. And Colorado will be the same problem. Their market is going to open in January, and if they don't have a registry in place by then, we're going to miss all of that golden opportunity for some good data. But my point is that in those regulated markets, what we're seeing is that when you create a reputation that mushrooms and mushroom chocolates are safe and effective by setting up this market, suddenly young people and people all over the place start to seek underground because they often can't afford the regulated market. And that's where we're seeing this problem that you're describing, where people end up in the ER because they're buying chocolates from an unregulated system, and these chocolates are loaded up with anything, with chemical, DMT.
And self-dosing standards,
yes.
saying if you don't feel anything after a little bit, have another. And just like that detective said, boom, before you know it, you're having a bad trip at a high school football game like that kid had. So are you surprised that drug detectives are seeing this preemptive push, like we're just talking about legalizing it now? Are you surprised to see such an explosion in the black market sales right now?
No, I mean, we work with the lab in Portland that is doing 90% of the testing, and they've told us that they have reports showing where they've done like secret shopper program, pulling drugs off the black market and testing them themselves, and they're seeing things like, almost no psilocybin and just DMT, but they're called mushroom chocolates, but they're loaded with different dangerous hallucinogens. So this is really scary, and it is partly a result of the drug war and what happens when we criminalize drugs without any other solution for how to manage this. But it's also partly when you create a regulated market without figuring out how to manage the illicit market. So, with cannabis, we really didn't see a big change in the illicit market. Everybody thought, a cannabis regulated market would suppress the black market and make it uninteresting, but we still see a very vibrant.
That's what they thought.
Yeah.
This detective who works the HIDTA Drug Task Force, that regional task force, he said that legalizing marijuana made the black market explode tenfold for marijuana. He also said that, what was it? I didn't use this soundbite in the story because it would have gone too sideways, but he said that it's so bad because he showed me how on Snapchat and stuff you can get dealers delivering to your door. We showed you some of that footage in the story, but this detective who you're looking at right here, and you're looking at the price charts.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you can buy for anywhere from 20 bucks. You've got 20 bucks. We got your mushrooms. We got your pot. We got your whatever you want to buy off here. If you want to spend $400, we'll, if you want to buy more and have a party with your friends, we'll do that too, and we'll deliver to your door. So it's pretty wild, but he said, I'm losing my train of thought here, but he was talking about just like how it exploded for Arizona sales for recreational weed and black market. That's what it was, is he says he will get contacted by the licensed marijuana dispensaries, and they will show them, hey, there's a dealer on Snapchat or whatever doing illegal sales. Can you do something about this? And he's like, well, that should show you that it is still a problem. So it is a chicken and egg thing, because you get people on both sides of the conversation saying legalize everything, tax it, regulate it, and then others who are saying legalizing it makes it worse on the black market sales.
It's so tricky, and I mean, the problem is the industry has a profit motive to claim, they're going to make all sorts of claims about how beneficial this will be to create a regulated market, but in fact, we've already seen with the marijuana model that was not successful, and mushrooms could be the same challenge. So I don't think that should be the argument that creates legal access. It should be because there's science to support that natural mushrooms do help people, and it can't just be relying on anecdotal evidence. We have to do the controlled studies, and that's why I'm so proud of Arizona for taking the initiative. We had, really unlikely allies in this project. We had so many conservative Republicans, evangelicals who stepped up and said, you know what, if this can help reduce suffering, and these are, God-given mushrooms and plants that have benefits. I mean, like you said, we're learning from all this ancestral wisdom.
Peyote,
yeah,
we've heard about that. Smoking the peace pipe, all these different things. So, and that's the other thing too, is I feel like kids here, it's legal somewhere, okay? So they made it legal in Colorado. They made it legal in Oregon. It's from the earth. We heard the same thing with weed. So it's like, if it's legal somewhere, how bad can it really be? And I think sometimes kids will experiment with mushrooms more than they would with like oxy. They've drilled in that one pill can kill, one pill can kill. But now you have kids, 14-year-olds in this story that I did, who are like, oh, it's natural.
Right. That is a real challenge. It's when people think something's natural, they think it's automatically safe, and we know that these, as we talked about, like this is can be a difficult experience. It can also be super positive and transformative for people's lives in the right set and setting. Yeah. But we have to know how to harness the potential of these mushrooms or plants in order to give people the best experience with the least scary effects, and that's why the science is so crucial.
Okay, I think we're down to the last moments here, and I'm just scrolling through. Jason, were you seeing anything else that we've maybe overlooked here? I want to make sure to put some last eyes on this. Thank you guys for being part of this live conversation. Hearing a lot of kudos to you and your team at SRI for, putting Arizona on the map for this, and lots of other questions. I'm just trying to go through it. It's interesting because it's, you have people who are like, parents need to, really watch their kids, and that needs to be the onus on them, and then others really talking about trying to get this fast-tracked so that we can get help to folks who are relying, unfortunately, on pharmaceuticals that aren't working or aren't reliable for them. So, okay, it looks like we've covered pretty much everything here, and we'll try to get online as well after we log off on this live chat, because I know maybe some other questions will start coming through. You can also reach out to us through the links in the story as well. But hopefully that just got the conversation going. Is there anything else that you want to add that we didn't cover?
I think just keep an eye out in the fall. We hope to, the study itself will only take about a year to complete, but the ramp up to getting all the regulatory approvals is really challenging. So hopefully with all this public excitement and pressure, maybe the FDA will hear that and will agree to greenlight these studies more quickly than they normally do, because we've had studies on clinical hold with FDA for years, and we don't want that to happen. So it's important that the public keep expressing their support for these to the FDA and to their congressmen who control the FDA budget, so that maybe we can start to show the FDA that the public wants to see whole plants and whole mushrooms go through clinical trial process, and they shouldn't be banned from that.
If it makes it on the ballot in November, do you think it'll pass?
I think there's a massive amount of support, and I hope if the voters do decide that, hopefully we'll go into a very intensive rulemaking process. I sit on the Colorado Commission, so I'm actually on the Natural Medicine Board, even though I'm not I'm an Arizona resident, but
we'll claim you.
But we wanted to, I wanted to be able to help them and share our experiences with being in a federally legal environment. And so we've spent over 2 years doing the rulemaking for this regulated market that's about to open in Colorado in January. So I want to impress upon the public here that that's what it takes, is a really thoughtful, diverse group of people who can come up with the best rules around a program like that.
Because right now the verbiage for that voter initiative is very generic. They don't have to file anything while they're collecting signatures. It's just like an intent to file. And so it's like 265,000 signatures that they've got to turn in by next week. You can count on us here at Arizona's Family to keep you posted on that. Dr. Sue, thank you. And somebody says thank you. You are owed millions, lifetimes of gratitude.
Oh my gosh.
So thanks for being a part of our conversation, answering questions from viewers, and of course, helping balance the talk, you know, recognizing that there are success stories, there are horror stories, and we've got to work together to find out a responsible way to take a look at these very powerful psychedelics that could be life-changing, but we've just got to figure out a way to be responsible about what's happening with the realities and the risks to those kids who are being targeted online. Thanks so much for being a part of the conversation, and we'll have more of the story online. Scroll Snapchat. It's easy to find flashy reels for psychedelic mushrooms, dealers posting price charts and QR codes for illegal psilocybin shrooms and edibles delivered to your door.
Open the door! Open the door!
Narcotics detectives are busting more labs in residential neighborhoods all over the valley and state. Rooms full of mason jars and plastic tubs, bags of mushrooms, psilocybin powder, capsules, edibles, and infused chocolate bars in every flavor imaginable.
We caught a drug dealer bringing drugs to our son's bedroom window.
This Valley father doesn't want to be named. His home security camera helped catch the dealer who sold to his 15-year-old son. Detectives say it was another teen who helped lock up 3 suspects higher up the chain.
There was a very large drug bust and weapons seizure related to the information that I provided them.
He says his son started with weed and switched to mushrooms so it wouldn't show on his home drug test. This picture was on his cell phone showing what he bought and ate hours before he wound up in the ER.
That put him into a psychotic episode, and it unfortunately unfolded at a very public event. It was at a high school football game. Blue and red lights are flashing everywhere. There's quite a crowd. Yeah, it was very disturbing.
How long did it take for him to start coming back to reality?
It took a very long time. He actually had to have multiple doses of antipsychotics.
We hear about that all the time. We see it all the time.
Maricopa County Detective Matt Shea works a regional drug task force tracking a recent explosion of illegal psilocybin on our streets.
Not just 1 pound, 10 pounds, 15 pounds, 20 pounds at a time of mushrooms. It's crazy.
He says just as legalizing marijuana multiplied black market pot sales in Arizona tenfold, they're seeing a precursor push of psilocybin mushrooms flooding the valley, specifically targeting kids and teens.
It rewires the brain a bit, and that's not something we should be doing to our kids that are 16, 17, 18 years old, 14 years old, 12 years old. We're seeing it.
There have been countless cases of tragedies, close calls, and bad trips from psychedelic hallucinations. 8 months ago, an Alaska Airlines pilot tried killing the engines mid-flight, convinced it would wake him up. A big problem with self-dosing suggestions like this. Start with 1 or 2 pieces. If there are no effects, have another.
So I could have it and nothing's happened for 20 minutes. I'll eat more because I'm like, oh, that must have been not enough. I'll eat more, and I'll eat more, and I'll eat more. Next thing you know, everything hits at once. Bam, now you freak out at a football game.
It's kind of like a Russian roulette here.
Dr. Sue Sisley runs the only lab in the country cleared by the feds to grow psilocybin mushrooms, not synthetics.
These mushrooms are not to be played with, and they can take you into some very dark rabbit holes.
She's got a wait list of patients eager to be part of the first clinical trial in the world right here in Scottsdale.
They can be a wonderful medicine, or they can cause very severe side effects.
Her trial findings for safe dosing standards could take another year. One reason the governor vetoed the push to legalize psilocybin clinics without any proof of diagnosis for treatment.
We need to start with the science first.
While her lab takes precautions to prevent toxic mold, illegal home grows are covered in it. Are there any regulations in place to protect the next family that comes into that apartment or house?
No, unfortunately it's not.
A hidden harm on top of another threat. Guns seized in nearly every bust.
They're meeting people they don't know to sell a product that's illegal.
Kids hear that it's legal somewhere else, so they think it's okay.
The #1 focus for this man's family now, getting his son sober. He says residential rehabs already run more than $150,000 out of pocket, but the greater cost is not knowing if a flashback of that bad trip will derail him down the road.
The damage it's doing is unmeasurable.